and angry. I've never felt so torn apart.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of New Gameplay Today. My name is Marcus Stewart. I am joined by Kyle Hilliard. Hello.
Hey, I think this is an entry in Old Gameplay Yesterday, actually, our sister series, right?
Yes, it's gotten a little dusty over there, but, we decided to update the page a little bit. Kyle, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
When I say the name Trance Memory, what does that mean to you?
Wait. Okay, it's a DS game, right?
It is, yes.
But that wasn't the North American name, was it?
It was, actually.
It was. Okay. Then yes, the DS game is definitely what I think about and nothing else, and I don't question it whatsoever. Okay, I'm looking at the box art now, which I remember very vividly, and it is definitely Trace Memory.
You nailed it. I asked that because we are looking at Another Code Recollection, which is a remake of not only Trace Memory, the 2005 visual novel adventure puzzle game that came out on the original DS, but also the sequel, Another Code R, Journey into Lost Memories, that came out in 2009 for the Wii that we never got. It never came to the US. It only launched in Japan and Europe. So Another Code Recollection, which comes out on Switch this week, Thursday, January 18th, is in a complete remake of both of those games, kind of giving them another like a new lease on life, because Trace Memory was, from what I understand, a pretty niche and obscure DS game. And then, obviously we didn't get the sequel. So this is like another chance for them to sit in the limelight. Now, I'm curious because when I asked you about this game and to do this NGT, you mentioned that you have not played Trace Memory, but that your wife is a big fan, correct?
Yeah, I remember it coming out. And like I said, I do remember the box art vividly, and it was a game that had used the DS in interesting ways. If I remember, I believe it was a game where you had to close the system to solve a puzzle.
Oh, really? Okay.
I could be wrong about that, but I remember, I think it was you and me, Marcus, randomly talking about it, is there's a puzzle in Phantom Hourglass, The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass,
right,
where you have to close the DS to solve it, and some people struggled with that puzzle, but I didn't, because not because I played Trace Memory, but because I was aware of that puzzle. Someone's done this before, so I was able to solve that quickly because of the reputation of this game.
Okay, see, I prior to this game being announced, or the remake, it was announced at a Nintendo Direct last year, and I had never heard of Trace Memory or Another Code in general. I was like, okay, what is this? And when I was previewing this game, I've been playing it, I'm a few hours into it, I watched a good deal of footage of the first game, and I was struck by how much of a remake this was. I just thought oh, okay, it was a DS game. Obviously they got to rework it to fit on a single screen of the Switch instead of two screens, but this is probably more or less what they were going for the first time. And the reality is, no, it is a complete overhaul of that first game.
It is significant. Okay.
So one of the biggest differences is that the gameplay in Trace Memory was top down, purely top down, whereas this is more behind the back, kind of third person, freely explorable 3D spaces. We'll see a bit of that later. Right now we're looking at the beginning of the first game, which we're only going to be looking at the first game because this collection is one of those, it's one of those sort of remakes where you can't select which game you want to play. You have to start with the first game, and then I assume once you beat the first game, you have the ability to lock the second game. But on the start screen, there's no, choose which game you want. It's just nope, start the adventure. And you're like, oh, okay, I get.
Edward Island.
That's particularly disappointing here. I never loved that. But it's particularly disappointing here because it's there might be players who love the DS game and have played it a lot who want to just jump straight to the one that they never got to play,
Yeah, I agree with that. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp did the same thing, which was a bit of a bummer. Yeah. I will say that I think this game it alleviates that a bit because the remake of Trace Memory, this remake, is a lot different than the
Right.
original. Like not even just sort of the presentation. Actually, so one of the big differences is that in the original game, your main sort of like device was like a fake DS that you used to take pictures and solve puzzles, and it kept a lot of data. Whereas in this game, they turned it into a fake Switch. Which I remember
funny.
when I first played this, I was like, "There's no way it looked like this back then, right?" It's like, was the Switch secretly designed after the weird camera and trace memory that we just didn't know about? But
I mean, it's like Link. It's like Link carrying around a Wii U gamepad in the in Breath of the Wild. You know?
yeah, it's so that's a fun little update. But even in the beginning, like from what I watched of the original Trace Memory, a lot of the puzzles have been completely changed. So
Oh, really? Okay.
in the original Trace Memory, one of the first puzzles was like a drawbridge that you had to drop, like as soon as you get to this island. That's completely gone here. Instead, you have to go do a puzzle. You have to get through a gate. And there's some other earlier puzzles that have been completely reworked. Like in the original, there was like some puzzle we had to assemble a sign. Like you find pieces of it and you just have to assemble it back together so you know where you're going. That's completely gone. So for people that are bummed out that they have to replay the original again, I will say that one, the original is apparently very short. Like when I looked it up on how long to beat, it's like 5 hours, and the sequel is apparently like over 15 hours long. So it seems like probably 3/4 of this game is probably the sequel, if that is still the case.
Yeah.
So at least it won't take you too long to get to the sequel. But also if what I've seen of the comparisons between the two games is any indication, it is a completely different experience. So you're going to be solving new puzzles.
I am surprised to learn how much of a proper remake overhaul this is, considering it is a pretty niche but like cult classic kind of DS game, that it's getting this much of an overhaul. It's impressive and surprising.
Yeah, I guess we should probably talk about what the game is actually about.
Yeah, please, enlighten me.
Yeah, so like I said, this is kind of the opening section of the game. You play as this 13-year-old girl named Ashley, who is traveling with her adoptive aunt to this island because growing up, she was told that her parents had died. But then she finds out that her father is apparently alive on this island and has been the entire time, and that the aunt knew about it, but for mysterious reasons, she was told to tell her that her dad's dead. But now that the dad has reached out and invited her to the island, and you say, we're skipping ahead here, so now you get to see some of the gameplay. So like I said, it's not top-down anymore. It's this more traditional third-person perspective.
Does it seem like the same layout? Or is it like really they just like took a step back and we're like, yeah, we're gonna redo all this stuff?
It's hard to tell when you're looking at it from top down, right?
True. Yeah.
So it's like I assume the broad strokes at the very least, but in terms of like, is it the same exact path? I would guess not, especially because since they've reworked some of the puzzles, like the sort of like architectural elements for those puzzles are not here in this remake, so they would have had to change the level to accommodate that,
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, yeah, your dad's alive. You're on this island. At a certain point early on, Jessica goes missing. So now you're trying to find where she is on top of trying to find your dad, and then going through this whole thing about like, oh, she's nervous. Like, oh, is my dad going to like me? What the hell has he been doing on this island this whole time? What's the deal? Why is my life weird?
Why is my life weird?
And it's about to get weirder because the other big thing with Trace Memory is that Ashley teams up with a ghost.
Of course.
Because that's what you do when you go to an island.
As you do, yes, of course.
Yeah, well, she encounters a friendly ghost named D, and he has his own sort of story where he's trying to remember his life, basically. Like, the entirety of the game, or I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say entirety, because I haven't finished the first game yet. I'm pretty far into it, though. But from the bulk of the game takes place in a mansion, which we're approaching now. And it's very much like sort of like classic adventure point and click style, where you're going room to room, you're finding keys, you're solving all these interesting puzzles, you're trying to find keys to the other rooms, and you're finding all these hidden rooms. And along the way, because the house belongs to Dee's family, the ghost, he's discovering things about his past and what happened to him and how he died, because he's like roughly the same age as Ashley when he died.
Okay.
So it's basically two kids on an adventure together, but one's dead.
Yeah, normal stuff, everyday stuff.
Yeah, so it's like him trying to remember his family while Ashley is trying to get to the bottom of what happened with her family. So that's kind of the thing that they have in common here. But I will say, like, as someone that did not play the original, I'm enjoying what I've played so far of it. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the quality of life improvements that they've made with Recollection, like obviously the perspective and whatnot, but like the map that they have, it's easy to read. It automatically updates with like clues and points of interest as you explore rooms, which is always nice because you're going to be doing a lot of backtracking around the mansion, kind of, I guess, for lack of a better comparison, Resident Evil style.
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you're doing spooky stuff in a mansion, it's hard not to think of Resident Evil, you know?
Yeah, and the game's not spooky, by the way. Like, it's not a horror game. Like, I guess D is the closest thing to like a spooky thing, even though he's like a super cool ghost. But yeah, like you said, it's as a DS game, it was very much like that visual novel kind of like point and click puzzle game. And we're seeing there a bit of a flash forward. The game actually starts kind of in media res with this scene, and then you sort of like, oh, what happened? How did she get here? So there's
now you're returning to where you left off, kind of.
Yeah, like that whole section that they just did a montage of. You actually have to play that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like that's like literally the first thing you do when you boot up the game. But yeah, like I said, it controls well. I will say a fun tip for people starting this game. I did find the movement speed in terms of like the camera navigation to be painfully sluggish. Like just rotating the camera up and down or left and right, it really took its time to do that. So I recommend raising the sensitivity of that immediately. Like I had to jack it up to, I think it's default to like 20 and I jacked it up to like 50 to make it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I don't know. I don't know if that was like a holdover of this being like a top down, more like just like a stiffer experience originally, you know, or they're thought like,
I guess maybe the developer just doesn't really think you're going to be looking around at high speeds. Maybe, I don't know, because it's a more slow paced game. I don't have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, you are going to be poking around environments trying to find like tiny interaction points of like, you're going to want to look at everything. You can see, or you can use your fake switch to take pictures, which is really useful because you can take pictures of clues that you can look back on later without having to revisit the area to be like, oh, what did that look like again? This seems important. Let me pull that up. There's also a mechanic later on where you can overlay photos together that are supposed to be overlaid, so you don't have to do the thing where you're flipping between the two, you know, to be like, wait, are these the same thing, or do these go together?
Right.
So yeah, this is one of the first like real puzzles. We're not going to see the solution of it, but this puzzle was in the original. So this was one of the few. It was like, okay, it's different, but it's like more or less in the same spirit of it. And as I've been watching footage of the original, it's been fun kind of seeing like what they did and what they kept. And like I said, a lot of it they changed, but I don't know, Kyle, are you a fan of these kind of games? I know you like puzzle games, but are you a big visual novel kind of guy?
Not really. Like occasionally one will sort of grab my attention and I'll check it out and it'll pull me in. I really have to be in the mood, and this is not meant to sound dismissive, but I need to be in the mood to like read a book. You know?
Right.
And usually when I'm in the mood to play a video game, that's a different mood than read a book. So when the Venn diagram of those two things overlap, yeah, I'll dive into a visual novel. But I am charmed by this one just because of the odd history of it, and I do remember the DS game well because I think it was an early DS game, and like I said, it was doing something unique with the platform, which was like exciting at the time because the DS, I mean,
now what?
People probably kind of forget these days, but like DS was like some of if not the first like practical implementation of touchscreen gaming.
Yeah.
And like two screens was like just an insane proposition at the time. Like during that era when someone was trying something interesting with the platform, like I was all ears. I was like, what? Even if I wasn't necessarily playing it like this, I didn't play the game. I was like reading about it and curious what the developer was doing with it.
I'm not playing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're introducing D here. But yeah, I will say on like, I do like visual novels, especially more unique ones. I don't play them often, but I'm down for them. This is less texty than the average visual novel, so I think it has that going for it. It also helps that it has full voice acting, which the original game did not. And they also have, again, quality of life stuff. Like you can have word or text autoplay, so you don't have to press through dialogue. You can just turn on autoplay and just watch everything like a movie, basically, until it's time to play.
That's always nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm doing for like right now and for most of the scenes in the game. But I have enjoyed the puzzle so far. There is some like little annoyances where like sometimes there's little elements in an environment that can be easy to miss, that can lead to frustration. Like, oh, okay, that I didn't know. I have to position myself in a certain way where this item that I thought was non-interactable gets highlighted suddenly. So there's been a little bit of that, but not like often enough to sour my experience. But I am intrigued with the mystery. Like, I think the game has a pretty strong hook in terms of like the storytelling, and there's been some interesting twists along the way where I'm like I'm gonna finish it, which I probably the best sign of like the game, right? Of like, okay, I want to see where this goes, and see I want to see how it ends and to see how it sets up the sequel, because I only know the very, very base premise of the sequel. Like, I know it takes place like a couple years later, and I think it's largely centered on Ashley's mom in that one. Where this one's a little bit more about her dad. So okay. I'm wondering, like, does this end like a cliffhanger, or what goes on here? But, it came out like 4 years later, at least in Japan and Europe. So I'm curious to see what people think of it. But yeah, it seems pretty cool so far. Like, it seems like a really well done remake. And again, for a cult favorite like this, it's cool to see them put this much work into modernizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I always up for seeing a developer take a sort of a cult classic and do something special with it and give it another shot in the spotlight.
Yeah,
I was looking at the game's Switch page, eShop page, and I think Nintendo is doing that thing that they love to do, where they don't even have a developer listed. Do you have any idea who developed this remake?
I do not. I feel like
okay, that's not surprising.
Yeah, because I remember looking it up. I think when the game was first, like, this remake was announced, and I almost want to say that the original developer isn't around anymore, but I might be. Yeah,
that's why I was asking. It's Sing with a C, C-I-N-G. They no longer exist.
Okay, so they're probably credited somewhere in here, but. Or
maybe it's a bunch of former Sing developers. Maybe they got together to make this. Who knows?
Yeah, singing one more time. Call them the choir.
That's right.
But yeah, yes, like I said, Sing, C-I-N-G. Who knows where they've gone on? Maybe Nintendo, like, they wouldn't bring this in-house, right? Like, it wouldn't be one of their R&Ds.
I don't know. They just don't like to share developer names sometimes. They did the same thing with Mario RPG last year, where it's like, we don't know. It's like, who made this?
It just appeared one day. Who knows? Just on our desk. But yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. It seems pretty cool. Like I said, it's out Thursday, the 19th, I believe, or the 18th. Actually, Kyle, can you double check since you're on the store page?
Yeah, it's funny. I just closed the page the second you
It's 19th. I just thought, okay, so cool. Friday the 19th, so tomorrow at the time that you're watching this. But yeah, I'm excited to see more of it. But yeah, everyone, that is another code Recollection coming to Switch. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.